I always thought my life was perfect. Great job, beautiful wife, wonderful son. But sometimes perfection is just an illusion. I'm Mike, a 40-year-old financial consultant, dedicated husband, and loving father. My wife Laura and I have been married for 15 years, and we have a 12-year-old son, Jake. Laura and I had what seemed like a perfect marriage. We had our ups and downs, but who doesn't? We met in college, fell in love quickly, and got married right after graduation. Our relationship was passionate, both emotionally and physically. We were that couple everyone envied, always holding hands, sneaking kisses, and sharing private jokes. Jake was our pride and joy. He was a happy, energetic kid who loved soccer and video games. I was proud of my little family. Saturday afternoons were usually family time. We'd watch a movie or play a board game. But this Saturday was different. Jake was acting strange. He was distant, quiet, and looked scared. My heart sank. "Hey, buddy," I said, sitting next to him on the couch. "What's going on? You don't seem like yourself." Jake glanced at me, his eyes welling up with tears. "Nothing, Dad," he whispered. "Jake, you can tell me anything. You know that, right?" I tried to sound reassuring, but I could feel my own anxiety rising. He looked down, fiddling with his fingers. I saw something, Dad, in your bedroom." A chill ran down my spine. "What did you see, Jake?" He burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. "I walked into your bedroom and saw Mom on her knees in front of some man. He told me if I told anyone, he'd end me." My heart shattered. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. My mind was racing, trying to process what Jake had just told me. How could Laura do this? Who was this man? And how dare he threaten my son? "Jake, listen to me," I said, trying to stay calm for his sake. "You did the right thing by telling me, I promise you. I'll take care of this. No one is going to hurt you." I hugged him tightly, feeling his small body trembling against mine. My perfect life was crumbling before my eyes, and I had to do something about it. Laura was in the kitchen, humming to herself as if nothing was wrong. My anger boiled over as I approached her. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to me, a confused look on her face. "What's wrong?" "Jake just told me what he saw," I said, my voice breaking. "Who is he, Laura?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. After a moment, she sighed. "Mike, I can explain." I shook my head, feeling a mix of fury and heartbreak. "Explain? How do you explain this to a 12-year-old? To me?" Tears streamed down her face. "I'm so sorry, Mike. It was a mistake. It meant nothing." "Nothing," I spat. "You've destroyed our family, Laura. Do you understand that?" She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I felt a surge of rage and a desperate need for answers. Everything seemed ordinary, but one event completely changed my life. It was a Saturday afternoon when I noticed Jake acting strange, distant, and scared. I asked Jake what was wrong. He burst into tears and confessed he saw something disturbing. "I walked into your bedroom and saw Mom on her knees in front of some man. He told me if I told anyone, he'd end me." My heart shattered. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I tried to stay calm for Jake's sake, but inside I was a storm of emotions. I couldn't believe Laura would do this to us. The image of her, the woman I loved and trusted, betraying me like that made my blood boil. But I had to hold it together, for Jake. I hugged him tightly. "Jake, you did the right thing by telling me. No one is going to hurt you, I promise." His small body trembled against mine, and I felt an overwhelming urge to protect him from the chaos that was about to unfold. Laura was in the kitchen, humming to herself as if nothing was wrong. My anger boiled over as I approached her. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to me, a confused look on her face. "What's wrong?" "Jake just told me what he saw," I said, my voice breaking. "Who is he, Laura?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. After a moment, she sighed. "Mike, I can explain." I shook my head, feeling a mix of fury and heartbreak. "Explain? How do you explain this to a 12-year-old? To me?" Tears streamed down her face. "I'm so sorry, Mike. It was a mistake." It meant nothing. Nothing, I spat. You've destroyed our family, Laura. Do you understand that? She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. My world was falling apart, and I knew I had to do something. I decided to confront Laura. She denied it at first, but eventually she admitted to the affair. My world was falling apart, and I knew I had to do something. I started looking for ways to solve the problem, but the situation got more complicated when I realized the extent of her betrayal. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't concentrate at work. My mind kept drifting back to that image Jake described. I needed to know more about this man. Who was he? What kind of person threatens a child? I decided to hire a private investigator. It felt drastic, but I needed answers. The investigator, a grizzled veteran named Frank, assured me he'd find out everything there was to know about this guy. Days turned into weeks. Laura and I barely spoke. The tension in the house was unbearable. Jake was still scared, jumping at every shadow. I felt like I was losing control. Frank called with the first update. His name is Mark Evans. He's got a criminal record, mostly minor stuff, but there's a history of violence. He's bad news, Mike. I felt a cold sweat break out. What kind of violence? Domestic abuse? Bar fights? Intimidation? He's a real piece of work. The more I learned, the angrier I got. Mark was a local lowlife with a history of manipulating women. He had to be dealt with. I couldn't let this man threaten my family. That night, I confronted Laura again. How long has this been going on? She looked down, ashamed. A few months. I met him at a bar. It started as just talking. I was lonely, Mike. You've been so busy with work. I needed someone to talk to. Talking? I laughed bitterly. It doesn't look like just talking, Laura. I know I made a mistake. I'm sorry, Mike. Please, let's work this out. But it was too late for apologies. I felt betrayed and furious. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. The next morning, I met with Frank again. We need to do something about this guy. He's dangerous. Frank nodded. We can track him, get some dirt on him, maybe even scare him off. Good, I said. Let's do it. We started tracking Mark's movements. Frank was thorough, following him to his haunts, noting his routines. The more I knew, the more my anger grew. This man had no right to invade my life, to threaten my son. One evening, Frank called with some interesting news. Mark's got a girlfriend. Looks like he's been cheating on her too. A plan started to form in my mind. If I could show Laura what kind of man he really was, maybe she'd finally see sense. Maybe I could drive him out of our lives for good. I decided to confront Mark directly. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't stand by any longer. I waited until he left his favorite bar one night and approached him. Mark Evans, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked me up and down, sneering. Who's asking? Stay away from my family, I said, stepping closer. If you come near my wife or my son again, you'll regret it. Mark laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Oh yeah? And what are you going to do about it? I felt a surge of rage. You threatened my son. That was your first mistake. This is your last warning. He stepped closer, his breath reeking of alcohol. You don't scare me, pal. I'll do whatever I want. I clenched my fists, ready to fight, but Frank's words echoed in my mind. Stay calm. Stay smart. I took a deep breath and stepped back. This isn't over, Mark. Not by a long shot. As I walked away, I felt a mix of fear and determination. This man wouldn't destroy my family. I would protect Jake, no matter what it took. The next few days were tense. I kept a close eye on Laura and Jake, making sure they were safe. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with plans and counterplans. I knew Mark wouldn't back down easily. One evening, Laura approached me. Mike, we need to talk. I sighed, exhausted. What is it, Laura? I want to make things right, she said, her voice trembling. I've ended things with Mark. I know I've hurt you and Jake, but I want to fix this. I looked at her, feeling a mix of hope and skepticism. How do I know you're serious? She reached out, taking my hand. I'll do whatever it takes, counseling, therapy, whatever. I want our family back. I wanted to believe her, but the pain was still raw. We'll see, Laura. We'll see. That night, I lay in bed, my mind racing. I needed a plan, something to ensure Mark stayed away for good. I couldn't risk him coming back, hurting Jake or Laura. The next morning, I called Frank. We need to up the ante. I want to scare him off for good. Frank agreed. We can do that. We'll make sure he gets the message loud and clear. We tracked Mark's movements, waiting for the right moment. One night, we followed him to a secluded spot. Frank and I approached his car, carrying cans of gasoline. My heart pounded as we doused the car and set it ablaze. Flames roared to life, lighting up the night sky. I left a note on his windshield. Stay away from my family or next time it's you. As the fire consumed the car, I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was risky but necessary. I had to protect my family no matter the cost. I returned home, exhausted but relieved. I knew Mark would get the message. I would protect my loved ones no matter what. Everything seemed ordinary, but one event had completely changed my life. It was a Saturday afternoon when I noticed Jake acting strange, distant, and scared. And now I was determined to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. I tried to talk things out with Laura, but every conversation ended in a fight. The hurt and betrayal were too fresh, too raw. I felt like I was losing control. I needed to know more about this man who had invaded my life and threatened my family. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jake's terrified face, heard his trembling voice. I couldn't let this go. Jake was traumatized, and I had to be there for him while dealing with my own pain. He had nightmares, woke up crying. I'd sit by his bed holding his hand, reassuring him. It's okay, buddy. I'm here. No one's going to hurt you. But it wasn't enough. I needed to protect him, to make sure this man never came near us again. I hired a private investigator to track the lover. Frank was thorough, professional, and discreet. The more I learned, the angrier I got. Mark Evans was a local lowlife with a history of manipulating women. He had a criminal record, a string of arrests for assault and battery, domestic abuse, and other violent offenses. He was dangerous, and he had targeted my family. I felt the greatest threat when I learned this man had a criminal record. He was dangerous. The conflict reached its peak as I realized the safety of my family was at risk. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge. I couldn't let him get away with this. One night, I was sitting in the living room, staring at the wall, when Laura came in. She looked tired, defeated. Mike, we need to talk. I didn't want to hear it. What is there to talk about, Laura? You've destroyed everything. I know, she said, her voice breaking. I know I've hurt you, hurt Jake, but we need to find a way to move forward. How? I asked, my voice rising. How do we move forward from this? She looked down, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, but I'm willing to try. I'll do whatever it takes. I wanted to believe her, but the pain was too deep. It's not that simple, Laura. You brought this man into our lives, and now we're all paying the price. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. Her apologies felt hollow, empty. I needed action, not words. I needed to protect my son, to make sure this never happened again. I needed to take control of the situation. I met with Frank the next day. We need to find a way to get rid of this guy, permanently. Frank nodded. We can dig deeper, find something to use against him. He's bound to have enemies. We spent weeks gathering information, tracking his movements, and building a case. The more we dug, the more dirt we found. Mark Evans was a predator, preying on vulnerable women, using threats and violence to get what he wanted. He had a network of shady associates, people who would do his dirty work for the right price. One evening, Frank called me. I've got something, a lead on one of his associates. A guy named Tony. He's willing to talk for the right price. I felt a surge of hope. Set it up. I'll be there. We met Tony in a dingy bar on the outskirts of town. He was a greasy, nervous-looking man with shifty eyes. What's in it for me? He asked, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Protection, Frank said, and a little cash. Tony nodded, licking his lips. All right. What do you want to know? Everything, I said. Who he's working with, what he's planning. I want it all. Tony spilled everything. Mark was planning something big, a way to retaliate against me for burning his car. He had connections with local thugs, people who would do anything for money. He was planning to hurt Jake, to get back at me. I felt a cold, murderous rage. "We need to stop him," Frank nodded. "We will. We'll take this information to the police. They'll handle it." But I wasn't satisfied with just involving the police. I needed to make sure Mark was out of our lives for good. I needed to confront him, to make him understand that he would never threaten my family again. I tracked him down to a seedy motel on the edge of town. He was alone, drunk and belligerent. I burst into the room, my fists clenched. "Mark Evans?" He looked up, sneering. "Who the hell are you?" I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "I'm the man whose family you tried to destroy. Stay away from us, or you'll regret it." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think you can scare me?" "I don't think," I said, my voice cold. "I know." I lunged at him, my fist connecting with his jaw. He staggered back, blood trickling from his lip. "You're going to pay for this," he spat. "Not as much as you will," I said, my voice deadly calm. "If you ever come near my family again, I will end you. Do you understand?" He glared at me, hatred burning in his eyes. "You're dead, you hear me? Dead!" I left the motel, my heart pounding. I had done it. I had confronted him, made him understand that I was serious. But the danger wasn't over. I knew he would retaliate, and I had to be ready. The next few days were a blur of preparation and anxiety. I installed security cameras around the house, hired a bodyguard for Jake, and made sure Laura was never alone. The tension was unbearable, but I knew we had to be vigilant. One night I heard a noise outside. I grabbed a baseball bat and went to investigate. Mark was there, lurking in the shadows. "I warned you," I said, my voice shaking with rage. He lunged at me, a knife in his hand. I swung the bat, connecting with his arm. He screamed, dropping the knife. "You're done, Mark. It's over." The police arrived and Mark was arrested. He was charged with assault and attempted murder. The trial was intense, filled with dramatic testimonies and shocking revelations. Laura testified against him, and the evidence we had gathered was damning. Mark was sentenced to a long prison term, and I finally felt a sense of relief. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained. Jake was still traumatized, and Laura and I had a long road ahead of us. I felt the greatest threat when I learned this man had a criminal record. He was dangerous. The conflict reached its peak as I realized the safety of my family was at risk, but I had faced the danger head-on, confronted the monster, and come out victorious. Now it was time to rebuild, to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives and move forward. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to protect my family no matter what. I took a deep breath, looking at the horizon. The storm had passed, but the journey was far from over. I would fight for my family, for our future, with every ounce of strength I had left. I decided to take matters into my own hands. Jake's fear fueled my anger, driving me to the brink. I tracked Mark's movements with Frank's help. Mark was reckless, always leaving a trail. I needed a plan that would send a clear message: stay away from my family. The night I executed my plan, I felt a rush of adrenaline. Frank and I followed Mark to a bar where he was drinking with some of his low-life friends. We waited until he stumbled out, alone, and headed towards his car. The parking lot was deserted, shrouded in shadows. Perfect. We approached his car, our hearts pounding. Frank handed me the gasoline can. "You sure about this, Mike?" I nodded, determination hardening my resolve. "We need to make him understand." We doused the car with gasoline, the pungent smell filling the air. The moment was surreal, every second stretched out, every sound amplified. I pulled out a lighter, my hands shaking slightly. "This ends now." The flames roared to life, devouring the car. I left a note on the windshield: "Stay away from my family, or next time it's you." The fire reflected in my eyes, a symbol of my rage and desperation. We watched the inferno for a moment before slipping away into the night. The tension was unbearable. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed like a threat. I had to protect my loved ones. I felt the weight of my actions, but I knew it was necessary. This man wouldn't destroy my family. I found the strength to continue the fight. This man wouldn't destroy my family. I looked for a final solution to end this nightmare. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread. I had crossed a line, but I had to stay vigilant. Laura and I had another confrontation. "What did you do, Mike?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I did what I had to do," I replied, my tone cold. "He needed to be stopped." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "I'm scared, Mike. What if he comes back?" I took her hand, trying to offer some comfort. "I won't let him hurt us, Laura. I promise." Days turned into weeks, and the tension slowly began to dissipate. Mark stayed away, at least for now. But I knew it wasn't over. I had to be prepared for anything. One evening I was sitting with Jake, helping him with his homework. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with worry. "Dad, are we safe?" I hugged him, trying to reassure him. "Yes, buddy, we're safe. I won't let anything happen to you." But deep down, I knew the threat still lingered. I needed a permanent solution. I couldn't live in fear forever. I met with Frank again, laying out my plan. "We need to take this to the next level," I said. "We need to make sure he can't hurt us anymore." Frank nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What do you have in mind?" "We need to get him arrested," I replied. "We need to gather enough evidence to put him away for good." Frank agreed, and we began to dig deeper into Mark's past. We found more dirt, more crimes he had committed. We documented everything, building a case that would stand up in court. One night, I confronted Mark again. This time, it was in a public place, surrounded by witnesses. "You think you can scare me?" he sneered. "I'm not here to scare you," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to end this." I handed him a folder filled with evidence. "This is everything we have on you. Every crime, every victim. If you come near my family again, I'll make sure you rot in prison." Mark's face paled as he flipped through the pages. "You can't do this," he muttered. "I can and I will," I replied. "Stay away from us, or you'll pay the price." He threw the folder to the ground, glaring at me. "This isn't over, Mike." I walked away, feeling a mix of triumph and fear. I had made my move, but the game was far from over. I had to stay vigilant, to protect my family at all costs. The next few days were tense, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. I kept a close watch on Jake and Laura, making sure they were safe. I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Then it happened. Late one night, I heard a noise outside. I grabbed a baseball bat and went to investigate. Mark was there, lurking in the shadows, a knife in his hand. "I warned you," I said, my voice shaking with rage. He lunged at me, but I was ready. I swung the bat, connecting with his arm. He screamed, dropping the knife. "You're done, Mark. It's over." The police arrived and Mark was arrested. He was charged with assault and attempted murder. The trial was intense, filled with dramatic testimonies and shocking revelations. Laura testified against him, and the evidence we had gathered was damning. Mark was sentenced to a long prison term, and I finally felt a sense of relief. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained. Jake was still traumatized, and Laura and I had a long road ahead of us. As I stood in the courtroom, watching Mark being led away in handcuffs, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief, triumph, but also sadness. Our lives had been shattered, and it would take time to rebuild. Outside the courthouse, Laura approached me. "Thank you, Mike," she said, her voice soft. "For everything." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "We'll get through this, Laura, together." We went home, trying to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives. It wasn't easy, but we were determined to move forward. Jake needed therapy, and Laura and I had to learn to trust each other again. But despite the challenges, I felt a sense of hope. We had faced the worst and come out stronger. I knew we had a long way to go, but I was ready to fight for my family no matter what. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the journey we had been on. The betrayal, the fear, the fight for survival. It had been a brutal, painful experience, but it had also shown me the strength of my love for my family. I reached out and took Laura's hand, feeling her warmth. "We'll be okay," I whispered. She squeezed my hand, her voice filled with determination. "Yes, we will." I closed my eyes, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in months. The storm had passed, but the journey was far from over. I would continue to protect my family, to fight for our future with every ounce of strength I had left. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about love, about protecting the people who mattered most to me. And I knew no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. The nightmare had ended, but our journey was just beginning. We would rebuild, we would heal, and we would move forward. Together. Laura and I separated. I filed for divorce, focusing on protecting Jake and rebuilding our lives. The process was painful, but necessary. Each step of the divorce felt like tearing off a bandage, exposing the raw wounds beneath. Laura moved out, and I had to learn how to be a single parent, how to navigate the emotional landmine of our fractured family. The lover, Mark, tried to retaliate, but I was ready. The police got involved, and he was arrested for unrelated crimes. The weight of his actions finally caught up with him, and I felt a grim satisfaction seeing him behind bars. But the aftermath was tough. Jake needed therapy to deal with the trauma, and I had to confront my own emotional scars. Jake and I attended therapy sessions together. The therapist's office was a small, cozy space filled with soft chairs and calming colors. Jake would sit there, fidgeting, his eyes downcast. It broke my heart to see him so affected. "How are you feeling today, Jake?" the therapist asked. Jake shrugged, barely glancing up. "Okay, I guess. It's all right to talk about your feelings here. This is a safe place," she said gently. I squeezed his hand, offering silent support. "We're here for you, buddy." He took a deep breath. "I'm scared, Dad. What if he comes back?" I felt a surge of anger and protectiveness. "He won't, Jake, I promise. I'll keep you safe." Laura's departure left a void in our home. The house felt emptier, quieter. I had to take on roles I wasn't used to. Cooking, cleaning, making sure Jake got to school on time. It was overwhelming, but it also gave me a sense of purpose. I was determined to rebuild our lives, to give Jake the stability he needed. One evening, as I was tucking Jake into bed, he looked up at me with those big, worried eyes. "Dad, do you miss Mom?" I paused, unsure how to answer. "I do, Jake, but we're going to be okay. We have each other." He nodded, holding onto my hand. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, buddy. More than anything." Life slowly began to normalize. I started to restore our lives after the crisis. We were healing, and I felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. I focused on my work, trying to regain a sense of normalcy. My colleagues were supportive, understanding the turmoil I was going through. They gave me space when I needed it, but also offered a listening ear. I also started to reconnect with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years. Their support was invaluable. We would meet for coffee, and they would listen without judgment. It helped to talk, to get everything off my chest. But the real turning point came one afternoon when Jake and I were at the park. He was playing with some kids, laughing and running around. It was the first time I had seen him so carefree in a long time. I sat on a bench, watching him, and felt a glimmer of hope. Laura and I maintained a civil relationship for Jake's sake. We agreed to joint custody, ensuring that Jake had both of his parents in his life. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We met once a week to discuss Jake's progress, to make sure we were on the same page. One evening, Laura came over to pick up Jake. She looked different, more subdued. "How is he doing?" she asked, her voice soft. "He's getting better," I replied. "The therapy is helping." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mike, for everything." I sighed, feeling a mix of emotions. "We can't change the past, Laura. We can only move forward." She reached out, touching my arm. "Thank you for being there for him, for both of us." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We stood there for a moment, a silent understanding passing between us. Life was far from perfect, but it was improving. I found solace in routine, in the small moments of joy with Jake. We would have movie nights, build Lego sets together, and take weekend trips to the beach. Each of these moments was a step towards healing. I also started dating again. It was awkward at first, trying to navigate the dating scene after so many years. But it was also exciting, a reminder that life goes on. I met some wonderful women, and although none of the relationships lasted, they helped me rediscover parts of myself that I had forgotten. One woman, Sarah, stood out. She was kind, understanding, and had a way of making me laugh even on my worst days. We took things slow, not wanting to rush into anything. She met Jake, and they got along well. It was a new chapter, a chance to rebuild my life. Through it all, Jake remained my top priority, his happiness, his well-being. I enrolled him in soccer, something he had always loved. Seeing him on the field, focused and determined, brought a smile to my face. He was finding his way, just like I was. We continued therapy, both individually and together. It was a safe space to express our fears and our hopes. The therapist helped us navigate the complexities of our emotions, guiding us towards healing. One day, Jake came to me with a drawing. It was a picture of our family, him, me, and Laura. "I made this in therapy today," he said, a shy smile on his face. I looked at the drawing, my heart swelling with pride and love. "It's beautiful, Jake, just like our family." He hugged me, holding on tightly. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, buddy, always." As the months passed, the wounds began to heal. Life slowly began to normalize. We were healing, and I felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. I focused on being the best father I could be, on providing a stable, loving environment for Jake. The scars were still there, a reminder of the pain we had endured, but they also served as a testament to our strength, our resilience. We had faced the storm and come out stronger on the other side. One evening, as Jake and I were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me. "Dad, do you think we'll ever be happy again?" I looked at him, my heart aching with love and determination. "Yes, Jake, I do. We've been through a lot, but we have each other. And as long as we have that, we'll be okay." He smiled, leaning against me. "I believe you, Dad." In that moment, I realized that we were going to be okay. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were moving forward, together, and that was all that mattered. Life was slowly getting back to normal. We were healing, and I felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. For Jake, for myself, for our future. As I looked at the horizon, the sun setting in a blaze of colors, I felt a sense of peace. We had come a long way, and we still had a long way to go, but we were on the right path, and that was enough. The storm had passed, and we were ready to embrace the future, together. The trial was intense. Every day I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding, my mind racing. Laura testified against Mark, and I could see the pain and regret in her eyes. She was brave, standing up there, recounting the horrors we had endured. It was a small victory, but it brought some closure. Mark glared at us from the defendant's seat, his eyes filled with hatred. I felt a mix of satisfaction and fear. He was finally facing justice, but the memories of his threats and violence still haunted me. The prosecutor laid out the case with precision, presenting the evidence we had gathered. The private investigator's reports, the threats Mark had made, the violent outbursts. It was all there, laid bare for the jury to see. The defense tried to paint Mark as a misunderstood man, someone who had fallen on hard times. But the evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies, the physical evidence, it was too much to deny. Laura's testimony was the hardest to hear. She spoke about the affair, the threats, the fear she felt. She broke down in tears at one point, and I wanted to rush to her, to comfort her. But I stayed in my seat, gripping the edge of the bench, fighting my own emotions. Finally, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty. Mark was sentenced to a long prison term, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained. I realized that trust is fragile. Jake and I grew closer, and I focused on being the best father I could be. I spent more time with him, helping him with homework, taking him to soccer practice, just being there for him. We had been through so much, but we were healing, slowly but surely. Laura and I maintained a civil relationship for Jake's sake. We met regularly to discuss his progress, to ensure he had the support he needed. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We both loved Jake, and we wanted what was best for him. One evening, Laura came over to talk. "Mike, I just wanted to say thank you For everything. I looked at her, feeling a mix of emotions. We did what we had to do, Laura. For Jake. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry for everything. I know I can't change the past, but I want to make things right. I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. We can't change the past, Laura, but we can move forward. She reached out, touching my hand. Thank you, Mike, for being there for Jake, for being strong. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We sat there for a moment, a silent understanding passing between us. It was a step towards healing, a small but significant step. I completed my journey. The revenge was brutal but necessary. We started a new phase of life, free from the toxicity that once threatened to destroy us. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were moving forward one step at a time. I focused on my work, finding solace in routine. My colleagues were supportive, understanding the turmoil I had been through. They gave me space when I needed it, but also offered a listening ear. It helped to talk, to get everything off my chest. Jake continued with therapy, and I could see the improvement in him. He was smiling more, laughing, slowly returning to the carefree boy he once was. It was a long road, but we were on the right path. One evening as we sat together, Jake looked up at me. Dad, do you think we'll ever be happy again? I smiled, ruffling his hair. Yes, buddy, I do. We've been through a lot, but we have each other, and as long as we have that, we'll be okay. He hugged me tightly, holding on as if he would never let go. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Jake. Always. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Life slowly returned to normal. We established new routines, new traditions. We were healing, and I felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long time. I started dating again, cautiously stepping back into the world of romance. It was awkward at first, but also exciting. I met Sarah, a kind and understanding woman who made me laugh even on my worst days. We took things slow, not wanting to rush into anything. She met Jake, and they got along well. It was a new chapter, a chance to rebuild my life. Through it all, Jake remained my top priority, his happiness, his well-being. I enrolled him in soccer, something he had always loved. Seeing him on the field, focused and determined, brought a smile to my face. He was finding his way, just like I was. We continued therapy, both individually and together. It was a safe space to express our fears, our hopes. The therapist helped us navigate the complexities of our emotions, guiding us towards healing. One day, Jake came to me with a drawing. It was a picture of our family, him, me, and Laura. I made this in therapy today, he said, a shy smile on his face. I looked at the drawing, my heart swelling with pride and love. It's beautiful, Jake, just like our family. He hugged me, holding on tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too, buddy. Always. As the months passed, the wounds began to heal. Life slowly began to normalize. We were healing, and I felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. For Jake, for myself, for our future. One evening, as Jake and I were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me. Dad, do you think we'll ever be happy again? I looked at him, my heart aching with love and determination. Yes, Jake, I do. We've been through a lot, but we have each other. And as long as we have that, we'll be okay. He smiled, leaning against me. I believe you, Dad. In that moment, I realized that we were going to be okay. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were moving forward, together, and that was all that mattered. Life was slowly getting back to normal. We were healing, and I felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. For Jake, for myself, for our future. As I looked at the horizon, the sun setting in a blaze of colors, I felt a sense of peace. We had come a long way, and we still had a long way to go. But we were on the right path, and that was enough. The storm had passed, and we were ready to embrace the future, together. I caught my wife cheating, and my revenge was brutal. The journey was painful, but it made me stronger. I learned that sometimes you have to fight for what you love, even if it means facing your darkest fears. I reflect on everything that's happened. The betrayal, the violence, the trial. It's all behind us now. Mark is in prison, and Laura and I are separated. Life is starting to make sense again, even if it's a new kind of normal. The house is quieter without Laura, but there's a sense of peace too. Jake and I are learning to live just the two of us. Jake and I spend more time together. We have our routines, our little rituals. He still goes to therapy, and so do I. We talk openly about our feelings, about what happened. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. We're healing. Dad, Jake says one evening as we're sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, do you think we'll ever be happy again? I look at him, my heart aching. Yes, Jake, I do. We've been through a lot, but we have each other. And as long as we have that, we'll be okay. He smiles, leaning against me. I believe you, Dad. Those words mean everything to me. They remind me of why I fought so hard, why I did what I did, for Jake, for our future. Jake's laughter is a sound I treasure now more than ever. He's starting to open up again, starting to trust that the world isn't always a dangerous place. He's making friends at school, doing well in his classes. I'm so proud of him. Laura and I maintain a civil relationship for Jake's sake. We meet to discuss his progress, to ensure he has the support he needs. It's awkward sometimes, but it's necessary. We both love Jake, and we want what's best for him. One evening, Laura and I meet at a cafe. She looks tired, but there's a resolve in her eyes that wasn't there before. How's Jake doing? She asks, stirring her coffee. He's doing well, I say. The therapy is helping. He's getting better. She nods, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mike, for everything. I sigh, feeling a mix of emotions. We can't change the past, Laura, but we can move forward. She reaches out, touching my hand. Thank you, Mike, for being there for Jake, for being strong. I nod, not trusting myself to speak. It's a small step towards healing, a small but significant step. As the weeks turn into months, life slowly returns to normal. I focus on my work, on rebuilding our lives. My colleagues are supportive, understanding the turmoil I've been through. They give me space when I need it, but also offer a listening ear. It helps to talk, to get everything off my chest. I also start dating again, cautiously stepping back into the world of romance. It's awkward at first, but also exciting. I meet Sarah, a kind and understanding woman who makes me laugh even on my worst days. We take things slow, not wanting to rush into anything. She meets Jake, and they get along well. It's a new chapter, a chance to rebuild my life. Through it all, Jake remains my top priority. His happiness, his well-being. I enroll him in soccer, something he's always loved. Seeing him on the field, focused and determined, brings a smile to my face. He's finding his way, just like I am. We continue therapy, both individually and together. It's a safe space to express our fears, our hopes. The therapist helps us navigate the complexities of our emotions, guiding us towards healing. One day, Jake comes to me with a drawing. It's a picture of our family, him, me, and Laura. I made this in therapy today, he says, a shy smile on his face. I look at the drawing, my heart swelling with pride and love. It's beautiful, Jake, just like our family. He hugs me, holding on tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too, buddy, always. As the months pass, the wounds begin to heal. Life slowly begins to normalize. We're healing, and I feel a sense of hope for the first time in months. I know there will be challenges ahead, but I'm ready to face them. For Jake, for myself, for our future. One evening, as Jake and I are sitting on the porch watching the sunset, he turns to me. Dad, do you think we'll ever be happy again? I look at him, my heart aching with love and determination. Yes, Jake, I do. We've been through a lot, but we have each other. And as long as we have that, we'll be okay. He smiles, leaning against me. I believe you, Dad. In that moment, I realize that we're going to be okay. The road ahead is still uncertain, but we're moving forward, together, and that's all that matters. Life is slowly getting back to normal. We're healing, and I feel a sense of hope for the first time in months. I know there will be challenges ahead, but I'm ready to face them. For Jake, for myself, for our future. As I look at the horizon, the sun setting in a blaze of colors, I feel a sense of peace. We've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. But we're on the right path, and that's enough. The storm has passed, and we're ready to embrace the future. Together. The story concludes, but our journey is just beginning. I look at Jake and see hope. We will be okay. The future is ours to create,